spinal cord. It regulates the signals from the eyes, the ears, and other sense organs, thereby providing an agency for selecting what is to be attended to from moment to moment. And it is this part of the brain that Amy was told was now the most common area for the newer alien implants to be located. If the aliens are indeed placing control implants into this area, then they would be able, as you've seen from this just very brief description of the brainstem activity, they would be able to control everything from the person's level of consciousness to the bodily functions to the memory and thought processes and the assessment of all sensory input. Now, if you don't think the implications of that kind of control are overwhelming, think again. And I hope Marianne will stimulate some exciting conversations with you tomorrow morning about the possibilities of this area of the brain being the point of alien control through which abductees can be kept awake, put to sleep, put in an altered state, made to get up and do things that they would not choose to do, made to say things they would not say, made to forget things that they have said and done, etc. All sensory input being controlled by this area. Through the implant, any number of realities can be presented to the abductee that are not really there. And what one remembers is controlled through this area, so the repression of memory of these events is very easily controlled as well. I think the implications are staggering. So also, however, are the implications of the final point I want to make this morning, and that is the reports on the cloning of human bodies that I previously encountered with Ted's investigation. In the women of Taken, two of them women, Pat and Lisa, both remember being shown cloned copies of their bodies, just as Ted reported having a cloned copy of his body. But the explanations that Pat and Lisa received from the aliens about these cloned bodies are highly contradictory. As I talk about in the book, Pat, whose alien experiences, now this is the woman who had the 1954 family abduction in Indiana, followed by the military's arrival and sequestering and drugging and so on. Pat had had, throughout her alien encounters, a very religious atmosphere or overtone to these events, instrumented by the aliens. For instance, the first time there on the farm that the family was abducted, when Pat's grandmother began to, what we would say now, freak out and start praying to Jesus for help as these little grays came into the room, a blue beam of light came through the ceiling, just like in Star Trek, and Jesus popped out of it and said, in effect, they're with me, it's okay. And as I'm very fond of saying, and I don't know why I like this so much, except it always gets me, I asked Pat what Jesus looked like, and she said, oh, he was beautiful. He was so awe-inspiring. He was blonde-haired and blue-eyed, and just beautiful. And I said, hey, Pat, look back at the New Testament. I don't think that's what Jesus probably looked like, historically speaking. And it went right over Pat's head, and she said, with tears of joy in her eyes, well, this one did. They knew how to push Pat's buttons. She was a very religious person. She was also told essentially that the aliens there with her were angels, and that their job was to prepare new bodies, as mentioned in the Bible, for the coming return of Jesus and the resurrection. When Jesus comes down with the legion of spacecraft to carry out this changeover, it was the aliens who are in charge of providing those new bodies. You want to see yours, Pat, they said? So this was wonderful. Pat is now assured that when the resurrection comes, she's got the vehicle for it. Lisa, on the other hand, down in Alabama, was told that the cloned copy of her body could be used in a very threatening manner. In effect, that it could be used to replace her if she didn't cooperate with the alien program, and that no one would know the difference. Not quite the same story as the resurrection. I would point out that such an implication of threat and replacement was also made to Ted Rice during an abduction when he was a young teenager, and there were several other teenagers abducted with him at that time, and cloned replacement threats were made also at that point. So these are the 3 points that I really wanted to make briefly this morning before I do the presentation of the video with illustrations from the women in Taken. And like a good English teacher, I'm supposed to summarize what I've said, and I'm going to do that right now. For you to consider 3 points, hopefully. First, our own human authorities are seriously concerned about and involved with some aspects of the alien abduction agenda. If they take it seriously, it would behoove us to do likewise. And also, when human agencies are involved, there has to be some sort of trail of events. And I think thus a very strong possibility exists for some intrepid researchers to get out there and uncover and follow this trail. There has to be a record of human involvement. Second, much of this agenda clearly has a physical focus that should raise some very strong questions about some of the alien claims to be here on a primarily spiritual mission. The implication of both the implants and the reports of the cloned bodies are so potentially explosive that a great deal of effort toward investigating these allegations is certainly called for if we're really serious about wanting to understand the motivations of these entities and the purposes of their contacts with us. And third, I think we need to recognize that deceptions are employed at almost every level of this interaction to keep abductees from knowing about the actual events and the actual entities involved in these encounters. To me, maybe I'm just a suspicious sort, this implies that there's something they don't want us to know about. And often what seems implied from the reports is that there is something within us, the humans, something of which we could be capable, something of resistance or altering of this scenario that the abductors absolutely do not want us to be aware of. They go to great lengths to program our thinking about our encounters with them, that we are subordinate, that we are helpless, or that we are dependent, or that we belong to them. The list goes on. And they go to a great deal of trouble to convince us in every way that they can that we can do nothing about controlling these situations. The good news is that in a number of cases in the past couple of years, that hasn't proven to be true. Abductees are finding more and more specific instances in which they are able to resist the illusion suggestions, in which they are able to say no to procedures, and in fact when they have been able to break free of actual controls. This to me is a great step forward, and I think it's going to be something growing with any luck. We're going to find abductees are realizing there are ways to change this entire pattern of activity. The fact that in several people's encounters during the past few years they've managed to see or perceive more than the abductees wanted is probably the most positive sign I have to report to you today. Also, as a species, our ability to perceive the energies and the presence of these entities, I think, may be increasing. Maybe it's thanks to a number of possible influences. I'm not really trying to make a claim for where this increased perceptive ability may be coming from, but I think it's probably part of the accounting for the massive awakening to this phenomenon that you and I and our generation has witnessed, especially in the last decade. If these encounters have been a hidden part of humanity's reality for a long time, as such some researchers believe and present evidence for, then don't you think that the fairly recent explosion of contact reports is some kind of proof that things are not business as usual in this abduction game right now? Something is changing. But without an understanding of the screens and the virtual reality capabilities, however, we are left with only alien-created illusions to assess and act upon. And I think that keeps us from any real, useful responses to the situations occurring in our lives and so many other people's lives today. Only a fool would ignore the transitional state of events and ideas and beliefs in the time in which we're living right now, and I don't think any of us here are fools. All of these things that I mentioned at the beginning of my talk this morning are polarizing our society at an alarming rate, and we have no idea right now really of the direction things are going to go in the future. And that's in the general society. Within ufology, theories abound and arguments rage over especially the abduction controversy. And sometimes it's reached such extremes that I feel very confident this morning in predicting that we won't have the answer anytime soon if this keeps up. We should be admonished to get past the differences and start working on the similarities and the shared interests that we all have in this field. But we do have some answers, at least, some start report answers anyway. For instance, we know abductions are real. We know that the abducting agenda includes very physically oriented goals. We know that the abductors contradict themselves and often give false information, as well as information we don't have any way of testing. We know they are capable of masterful illusions. We know that they always take control of us during encounters, which to me is a sign that they fear an unfettered Homo sapien. And we know that our government knows about this situation and is actively involved to the level of carrying out covert and illegal actions against its own citizenry. No matter what the truth ultimately proves to be, we have to go for it. I mean, without it, we're like children playing with shadows. And we're ignorant, and we're certainly unempowered to deal with and confront whatever the real entities are behind this masquerade. To take it all at face value is foolish. To take none of it at face value is ridiculous. Investigations into this field there cannot be anything more important for us to be doing right now than to dig past our wishes, dig past our fears, and dig for objective reality and understanding. Well, that's the sermon for this morning, folks. What I'd like to do with the rest of my time is to show you and make brief commentary on some of the illustrations and photographs from the women in Taken, and I'll ask the gang over there in the corner to start the video. And before you do, Craig, just a moment. Most of the video is of slides, of photos and drawings. At the very end of this, however, is an excerpt from a videotape one of the women in Taken made when she was having extreme military aircraft activity over her rural cattle ranch in Tennessee. And I might point out that mysterious deaths and cattle mutilations on that area during this time corresponded to those in Alabama that Linda has made us all familiar with, and none of which were explained. Even when there were no mutilations, the dead cattle were simply, all they could find was unknown toxicology, and it led in a year's time to a loss of $11,000 worth of cattle. So this is something pretty big for the family involved here. So there will be a little bit of video at the end of this. So Craig, let's go for it. This is the farmhouse in Indiana in 1954, Pat and her siblings and her mom. This is where the aliens abducted the family, and then the next morning the military came and sequestered them. This is the only drawing that Pat has made of later experiences. She called that little device the soul machine, and she sat on it and ran her hands over those little holes of different colored light, and she heard a sound they told her was the sound of her soul. I'd love to hear about other reports similar to this if any of you know of them. This was also in the facility where she was shown the cloned body. This is Polly's drawing of some of the bulbous, wrinkled-headed aliens. She said they almost posed for her to get this conscious memory. You know how often they don't give you very much to take back consciously. And this kind of alien description has turned up in other people's reports. We'll see one more in here, in fact, in a little bit. From Lisa, here's one of her. She says, "I'm no artist. Don't tell me I am, because I know I'm not." And I think she did great for being no artist to show the hooded figures. These are less frequently reported, but this one she was able actually to see some facial features, where very often the hood completely obscures them. This is Lisa's drawing of another of the bulbous-headed entities.